I had the pleasure during the Twin Falls County Fair of meeting a great many people who are running for political office, not only on the local level, but also on the state level. And with a vacancy at the state Supreme Court, one of those people that I got the chance to talk with, at least for a few minutes, was Robyn Brody. She's a lawyer, but she's also a candidate now for a state Supreme Court. And it is, I think, it probably if you're a lawyer, practicing lawyer, this is a type of move that most people actually it's your lifelong ambition, or it's one of those ambitions that you have because it is truly a prestigious step up in that type of line of work or that field. It's 9:07. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX, newsradio1310.com. We were at 54, just dropped back to 53, and steady rain still falling over our studios and likely perhaps where many of you are this morning. But first of all, I'd like to welcome our guest to the show. Good morning, man.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, I was joking with you off there. I'm dry for the time being, but uh, we need the rain, I guess, so that's a good thing. Hey, off the beginning of our chat this morning, I was referencing an AP story that I saw, which mentioned that says candidates for court position aren't sure how much pro bono work they do, and of course apparently they interviewed both of you, or a reporter interviewed the two of you, and uh, I guess I don't quite fathom or see how much work you do for indigent or poor clients, how much of a factor that is in actually becoming a judge. But what was the reporter trying to get at with all of that?
Well, I guess I sort of have the same question. I think the upshot of the article was that neither Curtis nor myself actually keep track or report our charitable work to the Bar Association. And my point would just be this: charity to me is all in the giving and not in the reporting or checking a box for the Idaho State Bar that I've done a certain number of hours each year. I can tell you there are lawyers all over the state doing good things, and I think there's much more newsworthy stories than what's been given here.
Well, I have a friend. He's coming out in a couple of weeks to see the BYU BSU game, and all of us, we all joke that he does so much of the pro bono work. And of course, for people who don't know what that means, it means it's voluntary. You're not getting a check for it. But we joke that he could probably make twice as much money if he would just stop doing all of the legal work for all of his friends and other people that he meets for basically nothing. And yet, I think your point is a great many lawyers do that, and despite all of the lawyer jokes that you hear, most people are completely unaware that takes place.
Absolutely. And, when you live in a small community like Rupert, your door's always open, and we take care of our neighbors, whatever the need is. I meet people every day that don't have access to the internet or can't file their unemployment claim or can't get their marriage license, and we just take care of our neighbors. That's what we do.
I had referenced at just at the beginning the prestige of a seat like this on the bench, and I guess from the perspective of most people in law, they would agree with that. What is it that attracts you to the idea of serving on the high court?
I have loved. I fell in love with law in law school, and I say that because when I went to law school, I was also going to business school. I have both a law degree and a master's in business, and law school made my heart sing in a way that business school didn't. And it's kind of like, maybe somebody's a mechanic or likes to build things, when you step back and look at a model and you see what you've built and the satisfaction that you get, or like when a farmer, harvests his crop and that satisfaction. And that's the way that I look at the law, whether we're talking about a uniform commercial code issue or a statute or a constitutional issue. All of those things, just I love looking at the law, thinking about the law, talking about the law, and I love what it does for people.
We had a conversation at the fair, and I brought up the fact that a lot of times we bandy about a question, what is your judicial philosophy? Yet most of us who ask the question, and probably a lot of people in the public, don't quite understand what that means. And you had a pretty good answer that day, and I wonder if maybe you could give people a little bit of background when that question comes up, what it is that means, and what you specifically, what would be your view if you were sitting in that role, in those robes as a judge?
Well, I think in terms of judicial philosophy, you got to really ask yourself what is the court looking at? I mean, there's judicial philosophies about the Constitution, about statutory interpretation, about how you manage the court system. I mean, you can talk about judicial philosophies in all of those contexts. And for me, I mean, I am a very nuts and bolts practical person. When it comes to something like interpreting a statute, which always infuriates people, my philosophy is if I can stand in line at the grocery store and tell the lady next to me what a statute means and she gets it, then I probably got it right. If I can't convince her of what I'm talking about, then I probably got it wrong.
I had
When it comes,
mentioned, well, I had
go
mentioned
ahead.
that day that, when Antonin Scalia died, that I finally was able to read in all of the obituaries and the tributes. I finally figured out what an originalist meant, and uh, but you're interpreting state constitution as well, right? In if you're sitting on the Idaho Supreme Court.
Yeah, certainly from time to time, constitutional issues come up. But as you and I were talking about, the Idaho Supreme Court it's not a mini Supreme Court of the United States. It really isn't. Our court deals with so many I call them ordinary issues. I don't mean that in the sense that they're not important. I mean, they're incredibly important and they affect people every day. But, those sexy constitutional law questions that the Constitution is such a part of our tradition and culture. We love to talk about it. But the reality is the Idaho Supreme Court doesn't get to pass on those issues very often.
In fact, a lot of what you do, I think, it will deal with business issues and other things that come before the court. Um,
That,
and yet, you've also mentioned that while a lot of our court systems are somewhat clogged right now, the Idaho Supreme Court isn't. That it's got, it's not that it's quiet, but that it's not one of those courts that's overburdened.
no, not at all. I think actually the caseload for the Supreme Court has actually decreased over the last few years. But the issues that come before the court are incredibly important to the state. It's everything from child support guidelines to contracts to planning and zoning disputes, the nuts and bolts of life. And it's important. The other thing that the court does is they're responsible for managing the court system throughout the state. And so they work closely with the counties to make sure that we've got facilities and technology and access to the courts and court staff and those kinds of things.
Our guest is Robyn Brody, and of course, she is a candidate for Idaho Supreme Court. It's 9:14 and 54. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Now, of course, when you're campaigning for a seat like this, it's different than campaigning for other offices because the people who are campaigning for judicial seats, you're held to a bit of a higher standard when it comes to how you campaign. You don't call your opponent Crooked Hillary, for instance. That kind of stuff doesn't come into this. But you are a Republican, and what's interesting about this is you're both Republicans. Why would someone then choose you over, let's say, your opponent?
That depth of experience that I've got. I've been practicing law for 20 years in the Magic Valley, representing farmers, ranchers, small businesses, our local hospitals, doctors, people. I understand how the legal system affects people and am very connected to the decision making that goes on. I've been to the Supreme Court on numerous occasions, and it's a vital part of what we do. But I think I just offer a perspective that's missing on the bench, and frankly is different than my opponent. And I have great respect for his role in the legislature. But when you want to talk about having a separate but equal branch of government and having a strong judiciary that's going to be that important check on the legislature, I think you want someone there whose usual connection with the government is suing them and not being part of that machine.
I thought it was interesting when the primary results came in. Some of those high-level state Republicans seemed surprised that a candidate from the Mini-Cassia region would have the highest numbers, which it didn't surprise me, but it seems that they thought, well, we've got a couple of candidates here from much bigger population areas. Somehow you got the message across even before the primary.
I've had tremendous support throughout the state from the bar, from the lawyers, and Bill, I just attribute it to the men who taught me how to practice law and who taught me how to be a real professional and how to go about this in the best possible way.
I think, though, a lot of politics too comes down to still, even if you're running, whether you're running for, local common council seat, or if you're running for state supreme court, still is that retail politics. And you were mentioning the mileage you've put on the car as you travel the state to do this. That's a hugely important aspect of all of it, right?
Well, the best part of this whole process has been getting out and meeting people. I've got 23,000 miles on the car. I've been to almost every county in the state. Been to 11 parades. I've been to Marsh Valley Pioneer Days, the Camas County Pioneer Picnic, the Eastern Idaho State Fair. Heck, I even had a car in the Demolition Derby a couple weekends ago.
I was going to say, you got to get the message across in some unique ways.
That's right.
It is. It is. There's a comment made to me one time by somebody at Fish and Game that Idaho really could be considered 3 or 4 different states. So you are dealing with a lot of different cultures and regions. Do you find that the message can be tailored for one message, or do you actually have to, I don't know, address people culturally in a different sense when you're in northern Idaho or eastern Idaho?
You know, the amazing thing about running for the Idaho Supreme Court is that the issues and what's important for a Supreme Court justice are the same, no matter where you are and no matter where you sit on the political spectrum. You know, I think it always helps being able to get to know people and understand the issues that they're facing. You know, you look at counties, like Idaho County, Lemhi County, Custer County. You know, you look at their interplay with the federal system. You know, where they're surrounded by federal lands and things like that. You understand exactly where they're coming from and why.
For
And I
people
think
who,
that helps to be able to talk to them.
for people who'd like to know a little bit more about the campaign, do you have a web presence set up?
I do. It's brodyforsupremecourt.com, and that's BRODYFOR, supremecourt.com.
I'll just mention from personal experience, I found after emailing the contact on the website that I had a response within 10 minutes. So I guess somebody is very diligent working on that website.
You know, it's vital. I love to talk to people, and if they want to talk to me, send me an email. I'm happy to call. I've got a lot of miles and a lot of time on the road, and if you don't mind a little bit of road noise in the background, I'm always happy to talk.
Well, Robyn, Brody, thank you much for your time this morning. We wish you good luck, and we may be chatting with you again before Election Day.
Thank you so much for this chance, and to your listeners too.
Have a good day. Robyn Brody joining us this morning. Of course, she's an attorney, and she mentions, of course, doing some pro bono work in the Rupert area, coming from a small town background, and looking to be the next Supreme Court judge here in Idaho. And I want to point out, too, as well, you're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 53. Bill Cowley with you at 9:20 this morning. Got a lot ahead, especially the cost of caring for illegal aliens in America. New figures have come out.